Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's 7 p.m. on February 27th, 2023, and tonight we have committee meetings. We do have a slight modification for the agenda. Under City and Safety Services, the Ohio Valley Museum of Discovery was to present, and they are not going to be presenting tonight. What we do have, however, is under the Committee of the Whole, one presentation and two updates. The first presentation will be about the new Community Authority. Council members and city staff and some of the audience may recall that in November 28th, 2022, Mr. Joe Recchi came and presented the concept of a community authority. And this is looked at as a mechanism for both the city and the university to move forward with possible saving of the existing buildings and some redevelopment of the area. And we do have some next steps to take a look at as part of that new community authority formation. And it's not exactly like the Community Improvement Corporation that we did for the Armory, but it is a mechanism that we can use to our best advantage. Some of those next steps will involve a petition to create the community authority, and that's what Mr. Recchi is here to help us understand tonight. We do have a draft document that has been reviewed by our law director, and she says that the sections do align with Ohio Revised Code 349.03, the initiation of proceedings for organization of a new community authority. So that the document is in good shape. We do need to take a further look probably at the finances, working with our city auditor on that section. And as part of this process, we will also then be having a public hearing before we would initiate any kind of ordinance to move this forward. So Mr. Recchi is going to speak to us for about 10 minutes. And then we'll open it up for questions from council members and administration or comments. And then if there are any audience members who want to ask questions, they can do so also. Mr. Recchi, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for seeing me again. I'll try to give you back a couple of the minutes that I took the last presentation. I'm sure I went over my 10 minutes, but I am bringing forward, this is not, as you said, not an action item, but just an update. We're proceeding with the concept of a new community authority, having gained approval from Ohio University's Board of Trustees to pursue this approach, subject to the desire of the city of Athens. So there's a fairly complex array of approvals that are needed, including negotiating all the exhibits that go with the petition. But as you said, the law director has taken a look at it to meet the basic standards. We're being represented by Caleb Bell of Bricker Neckler, who has a lot of experience with it. If I can, I'm not actually sure how to.
There you go.
There, okay. This is the roadmap for the ridges, a very simplified one. The framework plan represents all times past up through the development and publishing of the framework and as it has evolved from 2015. We're at Step 2, actually, after about 30 months of research and presentations and working with the Ridges Advisory Committee, with the city, the county, understanding better the infrastructure that exists and that which is required to redevelop or to encourage the new investment at the site. That involved building an economic development strategy, which we've done. The financial plan for that will be one of the exhibits that goes into the petition for new community authority. We've determined the constraints of viability, that is the existing infrastructure, the need for new infrastructure, what can be done with the historic properties. That's our primary focus, is how to save those buildings and put them into good purpose that serves the community. And to align, by doing a market study, align that in the planning analysis, which includes the timing and investment of infrastructure. We did pretty extensive stakeholder engagement, including multiple meetings with the Ridges Advisory Committee, OU staff, open conversations, including town hall meetings, in quotes. There were meetings at Ohio University with staff, with residents, and advisors. and then followed up with the Athens Land Conservancy, the multiple presentations to the President's office and to the Board of Trustees individually in their formal meeting in February. So that we've gone through that process to try to align with the framework plan, try to figure out what is practical that can be done within the constraints of the city, the county, the university, and the conditions of the buildings. So what we looked at is maintaining and conserving land for recreation and public use. Our strong recommendation was, and I think I stated it at the previous presentation, to have a conservation easement for all the land that is not to be developed. So the vast bulk, there's approximately 700 acre site. We're proposing that the vast majority of that be designated in a conservation easement, that the restrictions be placed on it that match up with the way the property has been used in the recent past, that is in the last 40 years, which includes the land lab and other limited uses, the trails, the maintenance of the cemetery and so forth. But all that needs to be put into a conservation easement that is filed and of record, and that there's a proper stewardship and facility model for that. That we leverage the vacant space, both modest amount of developable land, but also repurposing the existing buildings to create flexibility to complement Ohio University's significant investment in the site to date, and to match that up for the long term. The coordination with the Athens City Council requires 3 pieces of legislation, what we're requesting. The longest lead time item is, in fact, the petition for the creation of the new community authority. We are also proposing a Community Reinvestment Act area that would be whatever the designated area for the new community authority is, have a CRA district assigned for that, and also a tax increment financing district for that. So those 3 pieces, the new community authority, the community reinvestment area, and the tax increment financing area, comprise the basis for seeking funding for infrastructure that is not an obligation of the city, not an obligation of the county or of the university, but instead directly of the new community authority. So if you can picture that as a steward that is put in place to arrange financing and support for the uplift of the community without bearing so heavily on the local community, either the city, county, or the university. And then finally, putting together a rezoning request. Right now it's all designated educational, but if it's transferred from the university to a new community authority, it's obviously under the jurisdiction of the city. All of the land is within the city, so a proper zoning application with the details would need to be submitted and go through the normal process. So there are several components. The longest lead time item, however, is the filing of the petition, which we would be prepared to do at some later meeting of City Council, and then filing the petition. There's a hearing period of 45 days before there's a hearing, so there's adequate time for that. But that's the process. The next steps, the new community authority, I want to be able to answer questions on this, but it's a stewardship vehicle, if you think of it that way, to implement the Ridges redevelopment. It's governed by a board of trustees. It has the ability to raise revenues through property assessments. That would be something like a payment in lieu of taxes if it has a tax abatement structure. And it requires no investment from the city, the county, or the university. The draft petition, the first draft was submitted to the City Council and Law Director. That's being reviewed now. It'll have to be refined, obviously, and all the exhibits assembled for it, including the actual property that is to be transferred, and that is yet to be fully negotiated with the university. The formal petition then will be filed next week or at a later date, and then City Council has 30 to 45 days under Ohio law for the filing to hold a hearing to approve or disapprove of the creation of a new community authority. So those are kind of the action items that are required coming up. So there are several pieces of legislation. This is the longest lead time item. They do fit together as one development plan. I'm happy to answer questions that you might have right now, or be responsive to questions that you might have as you review the various documents going forward.
Council members, yes. Council member Ziff.
Thank you, President Isley. Thanks for being here again. That was almost exactly 10 minutes. Good job. Nailed it. I had a couple
I need to
of
go home and
questions.
practice, so yes.
I think you nailed it. I had a couple of questions. One, just for clarification on so I know where all these puzzle pieces are going to be fitting in. After the 30 to 45 days from the filing of the petition, I'm looking down because I'm reading it right
Yeah.
there. We have that duration of time to approve this. Once that's approved, what is the sort of progress to occur directly after that?
So once the new community authority is formed, that's one of the preconditions for the transfer of property. So we have a purchase agreement. The developer, Ridges Community Development LLC, has a purchase agreement with Ohio University with many preconditions: negotiating the restrictions, deciding on the conservation easement, forming a new community authority and having that approved so it could acquire it. So all those pieces have to be put in place. The university has to approve the transfer of the property, including the same review of all the exhibits we're talking about now, to move forward. And for us to be able to move forward, we need to have the other component pieces, the Community Reinvestment Act and the tax increment financing, in place. Those don't have that lead time, but they would be presented so you have a chance to review the whole rather than one at a time.
Okay, so I think if I'm understanding correctly, once this has been created and approved and the land has been transferred, is there still an opportunity for, say, city council or people in general, outside of just the appointed board of the community authority, to have any kind of impact or say on what gets built?
Well, yes,
All right.
because you have zoning control, so you have the jurisdiction control over the whole site. So we would be producing that, including restrictions that we might place on the historic buildings, for example, using the National Park Service standards as a guidepost for any redevelopment of the site. So these are pretty clear standards illuminated. There could be architectural standards or a review board established with respect to new development opportunities in addition to the zoning approval. So there's a lot of room for input, and we consider it a very organic process. We don't consider it a monolithic development plan that's got many components to it, and it will have many participants, including potentially local home builders or commercial businesses that wish to move forward, and they would move forward in the typical process of zoning approval, building approval, and review. So there's a lot of input all along the way. And it's a 7 to 10 year plan. It's not it's not an immediate plan. It has many components. We are focused on buildings 2, 3, and 4 because those are the buildings that are they're iconic, but they're the most impaired building. So we know that needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
Last one, then I'll yield the rest of my time. I was curious if you knew if there was already sort of a plan for where. I know that we've sort of talked about and seen the big shows the whole parcel. This is where a building would occur, and I think I'm mostly asking because I went back through the 2015 Ridges Development Plan or whatever it was called through the university, and I pulled up one specific sort of chart, little handy print I brought for myself to look at, and it has highlighted on it the buildable areas, and a concern that I had was that the vast majority of the buildable areas, at least that I was seeing in sort of the more northwestern quadrant, were essentially just where there's existing trails. Like there's that long trail that goes up on sort of the top ridge with all that. I mean, is the plan to build on all of that?
No, in fact, the opposite. We came to the conclusion when looking at the feasibility, the infrastructure, the quality of the land, and also the other uses of the land, that was not an appropriate area to develop. So where the land lab is, where the trails go, where the old growth forest, those are really the areas we think we should concentrate. There's over 600 acres that we think would be conservation easement that would be permanent recreation conservation areas, so natural beauty and active enjoyment with the trails and so forth. So we basically compressed the development to a little finger along Dairy Lane, the area around the perimeter of the historic buildings, and the area off of Carriage Lane, which does not have road access now, but we've talked about where the sewer connection is and the street goes. There's a limited amount of opportunity there that is right now it's landlocked, doesn't have any trails on it, but there's a lot of that land that could be conservation easement land as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good answers.
Yes, Councilmember Swank and then Councilmember Crowell.
Since the meeting last Thursday, your presentation, I've had 3 inquiries about the TIF. In layperson's terms, because not only we have a big crowd today, but a lot of people watching at home and will be watching since we record these, could you explain how that works and what the timeline would be? Yes.
The tax increment financing model is a 30-year period of time. And the tax increment financing itself covers only the non-school portion of taxes. So that would be the taxes that would be collected for things other than the school. The first 15 years of that 30-year period are subject to the Community Reinvestment Act, which would have tax abatement. So the best way to describe it, I think, is a stair step. We start with there's zero revenue coming in right now to the county or to the school because it's all tax exempt. We segment off development for a 15-year period and use what would be a payment in lieu of taxes to retire infrastructure bonds that we are not coming to the city and county and asking for. We're raising those and paying those off. As those are paid off, year 15, from the year 15 placed in service date on, all of the school revenue that they would get from the improved tax base is available to them. After year 30, and so the school gets all of its funding after year 15, the county gets all of its share of the funding after year 30. So if you think of it as a stair step, first we have to get the infrastructure to get the investment. Next, the school system gets the revenue from the improved tax base. And finally, the county gets its share of tax revenue. All along the way, residents and workers at the site are paying city income tax. So there's a chance for the city to gain from economic development, for the school system to build a tax base that it does not now have, and for the county to be rewarded for over the long term for the increase in the tax base. We expect over $200 million of investment over that 7 to 10 year period that will ultimately be part of the tax base that the school system and the county benefit from.
So if you ask for 70% or less, the school district doesn't have to sign off, but if it exceeds 70%, they would need to sign off?
That's correct. And we have met with the school superintendent and trustees, certain trustees, to discuss that. So they haven't commented on it yet, but they heard the presentation last week of what we're looking at. We see it as very positive for the school system, but yes, they have to make a decision as well.
Are you asking for 100?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
We know it's a big lift. That is, the infrastructure is a big list, and we're asking for that because we have to stay ahead with infrastructure to bring forward development.
Councilmember Crowell?
Thank you, President Isley. Thanks again for being here. And thanks for doing the town hall, both with the community and the university, and one more, I believe, in March 24th. So we can still participate if we haven't yet. I'm most interested in what Member Ziff brought up, and you, I think, adequately responded to, which is really the changes from the 2015 framework plan to what we have today. And as I see it, the biggest change, and my constituents are most pleased about, is that Ridge's strategy area B, which in the framework plan showed some development, maybe an eco-village, maybe some new roads, et cetera. But I believe in the current plan, there is, as you said, no development there.
That's correct.
However, the language in the draft that we were reviewing for tonight uses language like park and recreational improvement costs, secondary site with an emphasis on conservation and recreation. And I'm wondering if one member of my neighborhood was concerned that that could mean a golf course.
No. I mean, we don't have a proposal for a golf course, and I think a golf course takes like 200 or 300 acres. We think there's going to be 600 acres, yes, 600 acres or so of conservation easement. So what we think is we're going to have a very limited amount of land devoted. I mean, most of the developable acreage is right at the historic campus, what we see when you drive around the Ridges campus. So it's a very limited amount. The reason we're doing other development at the site is to generate tax revenue or assessment revenue that we can use to pay for infrastructure that needs to be done to lift the project off. So that's very limited. And what we went through analysis, if it did not create an assessment for the historic area, if it encroached upon conservation area, and it was just development for its own sake, we weren't doing it. So it was basically, it had to meet those standards. It had to be additive to the effort to restore the main campus and do so in a way that was sensitive to the remaining land.
Great, and so the piece of this, I think, which maybe protects that land is the conservation easement.
Absolutely.
And so if I understand correctly, the university as the current owner of that property would establish that conservation easement or negotiate the establishment of that conservation easement with the
New community authority, or the developer, yeah.
Okay, so then that would all be
Yeah, so we
decision made.
anticipate either the conservation easement would be filed before the transfer, or it would be a requirement at the time of transfer. So it would be fully negotiated. And the city, I think, would be involved in that because there's a lot of input. There are a lot of stakeholders in that. I know from the town hall meetings, NAMI is among them because they've done a lot of work at the site. The Conservancy itself, which probably would be receiving the benefit of the easement or would be a caretaker or trustee of it, maybe be named in it. So we're trying to figure all that out. We're also thinking about the potential of Clean Ohio funds, perhaps for maintenance of the old growth forests and for the trails. So there are other aspects of this that really require collaborative. I think you can hear from this that there's nothing we proceed with that is not based on a full collaborative effort. So we have to do a little bit of the shuttle back and forth, but it's worthy of the subject is worthy of the effort.
Okay.
So going back and forth.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
May I continue?
Yep, we're going to try and tie this up at 7:23. We're going to try and finish by 7:30. So I want to give everybody a
All right,
chance
sure.
after
Just
you're
real
finished.
quickly, as we get into the details of that board of trustees that will actually have the authority, there's a lot of role of this council in the creation of that board. 3 citizen members, I believe, from a list or recommended by the university. And the language is something like agents of the university or citizen agents. I'm not sure how this works. But citizens doesn't mean resident of Athens, right? That could be somebody who is on a branch campus or works for the university in Columbus and is on this.
Yeah, actually, the way the Ohio Revised Code reads, it's citizens would be people that are using the site.
Oh.
So it's
Okay.
living or working at it. Right now, everybody working at it is Ohio University employees and agents. So, but the actual Ohio Revised Code is citizens are those using the new community authority site.
Okay, great. My last question is simply at the very end of the document, there is a list of all the parcels and the owners of the parcels. And some are the state of Ohio, some are Ohio University, some are the president of the university, the board of trustees. Does it matter what those owners are?
Well, not when the land gets transferred, but right now that's, the state recorded it in various ways. So they
Okay.
transferred it, they put it under the control of either the board of trustees, the president of the university, Ohio University, or they kept it at the state of Ohio. But we would be asking the state to approve the conveyance of the whole.
Okay.
So we have to assemble all that. That's what we
That's
know
what I
right now. And that's why the acreage is somewhat variable because we don't know exactly what the acreage is. The university has to agree to the transfer.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, President Lindsay.
Okay, other questions from council members? Let me see if there's anybody else. No other council members? Councilmember Swank, one more question, then we'll turn over to
Yeah,
Adam.
this is more a point of order question of the chair. This is a very comprehensive document, 34 pages in all, and we do have a timeline here today. At what point in time will council discuss the nitty-gritty of this and get into the weeds, such as the language and this, that, and the other of this draft proposal? Will that be in a committee meeting at a later date? Will that be at the hearing? Will that be at a first reading?
I would imagine it's kind of an iterative process, and what we're going to be looking at are the exhibits as they come in. We're going to have the public hearing. I would think that that we would come back before a committee meeting for further discussion before we have the first reading of the ordinance. And I imagine that is, are we thinking of a time frame of like March or April?
Yes.
So we do have time for this to come back to a committee meeting once, a committee meeting again. Yes, and there are some issues in here. And I do want to make clear, yes, Mr. Recchi, for the record, that City Council does have the right to name 3 representatives.
That's correct. That's under Ohio Revised Code. So
Okay. Okay.
there's some things non-negotiable. What you do with that, you decide.
Okay.
To that end, would it be possible, before we look at this again, to have that which is in this document that is set in stone, Ohio Revised Code or whatever, to be colored or something so that we don't have to worry about it?
Yes.
In other words, what's law is law would be nice to know, as
Okay.
opposed to what is negotiable, interpretable,
Okay.
so on and so forth.
Yes.
Yes, we can do that. And actually, the iterative process probably describes it well, because before coming back, there's going to be further review of this. We're going to have some refinements, and we'll be back with ideas, including notations on the exhibit. So there's plenty of time to get this right.
Okay. All right, thank you. We, 4 minutes and counting. City administration, comments, questions?
I do have a comment. Mr. Ritchie, thank you for all the work, the long, hard work that you put into establishing this. The only thing I really want to mention to council and to those who are here tonight is, you know, with a process like this, it is my opinion that this is the best shot that we have for the Ridges and the entire Ridges campus. I'm hopeful that this, and believe that it will come to fruition if we go through this process with the new communities authority. But again, you know, unfortunately, those buildings are in dire need of being repaired and brought back to life again. So if we aren't able to go through this process, I don't know what the ultimate fate would be of the Ridges itself. And I'm just being honest with council and those who are here tonight. So I think this is the best shot that we have for that
Good point.
facility.
Service Safety Director Stone, you've been involved in the Ridges Advisory Committee. Some comments or questions?
I'll withhold my comments till we get into the nitty-gritty details.
Okay, and do we have any comments from audience or questions from audience members? If not, Mr. Ritchie, thank you. It's taken a lot of time. I know you've worked hard with Buckeye Council and working with Appalachian Regional Commission funding to move this process along, and we very much appreciate it and appreciate how much you've involved the community. It makes a big
Thank you very
difference.
much, and thank you for your time tonight.
Okay, thanks. We'll move on to the next item, and this is the solid waste contract. And citizens and council members likely remember that we had discussion of this at a previous committee meeting, and we do have an update from our law director, and I requested for an opinion on the status of the bids. And I will not read the entire opinion. Council members have been provided with a copy, as has the mayor and the service safety director. But what the law director has stated is that there is a substantial legal risk with awarding a contract to bidders AHRC or Rumpke based on the existing bid documents. And she goes on to cite that specifically the parts that were missing from the AHRC bid, and then also the parts that were missing from the Rumpke bid, and that any bids, to quote her directly, any bids not prepared and submitted according to the provisions herein outlined and may reject any or all bids, in implementing this option, the city must treat both bidders equally and cannot forgive errors by one bidder while rejecting the bid of the other based upon similar errors. So awarding the contract to either bidder pursuant to the existing bidding process would be subject to a legal challenge. So she does, the law director further provides instructions for city council members that she thinks that there are 3 things that would need to happen. And there are 3 changes that she thinks would be important to include, and that would be first the lowest and best standard of award that's listed in revised code 735.05. That must be utilized. And that second, the bidders should be informed in the revised instructions that they'll be obligated to sign the contract as contained in the bid package without alteration or negotiation. And finally, it's important that any award on a rebid align with a clearly announced breakout of the scopes of work that may be awarded separately. So to comply with this opinion, what City Council would need to do would be first pass an ordinance to reject all the bids that were received, and then authorize the Service Safety Director to rebid. Second step would be for council to pass an ordinance to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise and accept bids in an amount not to exceed the recommendation of the Service Safety Director. And then finally, she does recommend that City Council pass an ordinance to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a written contract with the lowest and best bidder as authorized, as advertised. And that's the summary of it. So I would like to allow some time, given the importance of this for our city, very basic city services, and the fact that the contract does expire on June 30th. We're doing all we can to work cooperatively with the bidding companies and to, I suppose in a sense, it's a regrouping. So I'd like to open it up for comments from council members and then administration, and see finally if there are any comments from the audience. Council members. Councilmember Swank.
If the chair would indulge me, I have a very short list of questions that I would like to ask of the Safety Service Director, if I could.
Okay.
Mr. Stone, in a given year, how many contracts roughly come across your desk for various things in the city?
You know, I mean, it varies from year to year, but, you know, 100, perhaps 200, 300 contracts. I mean, there's a lot of things. And, you know, I mean, from a 600-page contract associated with a multi-million-dollar construction project to a small agreement for some sort of professional service, you know, across the spectrum of what is considered a contract. But as far as the person who signs things on behalf of the city, binding the city, you know, a couple hundred probably.
And of those couple hundred, how many of those would you say come to you as what I would call a perfect bid? And by perfect bid, I'll be very specific. A bid that needs no clarification, no negotiation, no further communication between you and the bidders.
So to clarify my previous answer, documents or contracts valued at $150,000 don't require bidding. So in instances of a contract that would come before me that does require bidding, in most cases, you know, there's a back and forth prior to the date that the bid occurs. There are, you know, occasionally clarifications after a bid is submitted, mainly on, you know, large construction projects, and sometimes having to do with irregularities between the written bid amount and the written in dollar bid amount or something of that nature.
So there are two other questions that I could ask you, but I won't, because you've been asked this one question before. What is your opinion on the matter? The reason I won't ask that question, you've made it very clear, and we all know, this is the one contract, the one and only contract that City Council controls. We don't have a whole lot of experience, unless we have it in another life, in another career, in dealing with contracts. Yet we're being asked, for whatever reason, to make an $8 million decision. I would like council to consider taking action. I don't know if it would be tonight or at our next regularly scheduled business meeting, to put the granting and awarding of this contract where I feel it belongs, and that is in the hands of the city administration. Contracts are an administrative function. We are a legislative body. They have the expertise, 100, 200, maybe more in a given year. why not put the contract in their hands to execute an exercise with which they're intimately familiar, rather than relying on council, who for whatever reason has kept the power over this contract.
And I think we have clarified with looking, our clerk of council has looked at some of the minutes to realize that there was nothing specifically that removed the authority of the service safety director and city administration from making this decision on this contract. So there was a perceived thought that council had the control of it, but from what we have found in the documents, it's not. So it may be a non-issue.
So this is kind of like the urban myth that the sign in front of the OUN and the recreation center could only change once a day.
Yeah.
And we operated under that forever, and we found out that was not the case.
And-
So if that is the case, that there is nothing written in stone, no pun intended, how do we, how do we move it to where I'm suggesting it belongs?
Well, and we do have a recommendation from the law director that says, I believe, the third item on page 2, it starts, it's the 6th line down in the 3rd paragraph, 5th or 6th. Finally, city council should pass an ordinance to authorize, then this clarifies it, pass an ordinance to authorize the service safety director to enter into a written contract with the lowest and best bidder.
Okay, I didn't interpret, I mean, I didn't understand it.
That's the way I'm interpreting it, but
I'm not disputing that, I'm just,
And we could double check with the law director, but I
Okay.
think that's what she's saying.
okay.
Any other questions or comments from, yes?
Hey, if I could
Service Director
speak to
Stone.
the point about, council explicitly withholding the authority on this. So no ordinance has been passed to date authorizing the service safety director to advertise and accept bids and enter into a contract for solid waste services. And the contract is up on 30 June. So we took steps anticipating that that's what council wanted to happen, which was to retain authority on this based upon the last 2 contracts that were awarded. And if you review the ordinances from the last 2 times the contracts were awarded, there was never a time where council passed legislation that said the service safety director is authorized to advertise and accept bids. There was just an ordinance passed after those bids were brought in that said the service safety director is authorized to enter into a contract with that. And so I went back and looked at those as well. I'm certainly willing to take it on if council deems that's the way to proceed. In this particular instance, I think that I didn't believe that was the way that council wanted me to proceed. So that's why we formed the working group with 2 council members, members of the administration to go forth and go ahead and solicit bids for consideration by council.
Thank you for that comment, perspective. Other council members? Councilmember Crowell?
I'll just repeat what I said 2 weeks ago, which is that whether it is the service safety director and the city administration, or it is this body that reviews bids for this contract, our hope for the city of Athens is that we have a service provider that meets our sustainability goals and that partners with local organizations in helping the city to move forward, not just manage what we have today, but to move forward to help us do a better job when it comes to waste management in the city of Athens. Thank you, President Rice.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from council members? Any other comments from administration? Any comments or questions from audience members? 3 minutes, Milena. If you could give us your name and address, and if you
Changes what
represent
I
a
was
group.
going to say, as you can imagine. My name's Milena Miller. I live at 25 Graham Drive, and I won't give you my emotional pitch from last time, but so this is quite different. So I think that the concerns of the public are certainly a lot. There are many concerns with the public about how we go forward with the trash providers in this city. And I spoke over the last couple of weeks with Bruce Underwood from AHRC because this figure of 1.7 million over a 4-year period continually was thrown out there. In this meeting, in meetings within my community on the Far East Side, with no further explanation and no breakdown. And I think David Discutner addressed this 2 weeks ago, as did a couple of other people, how does that really translate? That's what I wanted to know. That's what we all want to know. We know that we're going to have increases, whether it be whatever bidder you're going to be examining. So, but nobody, not Alan Swank, who keeps bringing up the 1.7 million, he was unable to give me a complete breakdown. And in speaking to Bruce Underwood, I began to understand, and I've read today 12 pages of documentation. And it is a very complex situation about how the trash fees are generated and how they're distributed either to individuals like myself, a single person on a fixed income, or to businesses, and so on and so forth. And I think this is an opportune time. You know, we've heard about this for years, between the conflict between town and gown. This is an opportune time to involve the university, to involve the landlords, to involve the parents of these students. I mean, I know this is a far stretch, but you know, they bring all this stuff, which becomes our trash on, I mean, move-out day is one of the big parts of this contract that is the most expensive time of the year. And I have worked that as a volunteer many, many times. And I have watched parents come in, remove their children, and that's the end of it. And we are left with everything which they brought here originally. It's thrown into the street as trash, and so on and so forth. The landlords do not ever, they have a very tight framework on their contracts. They can wiggle that. They could give these students a couple of days. You cannot move out on Saturday or Friday on the days of graduation and be expected, you know, I mean, there's things that can be addressed here. And I would really encourage all of you, no matter into whose hands this ends up, to consider really reaching out, involve some of us in the community if you cannot negotiate this yourselves, because it's time to make that happen. You know, if I'm going to go from $14 a month to $50 a month, that's a big jump. But I can tell you this, I've spoken to 3 of my friends who have Rumpke, and they've had nothing but increases over the years, and they don't get good service, and they don't even have recycling. End of story.
Thanks, Melina. Do we have other comments from audience members or other questions? Yes, come on up. Sure. If you could just give us your name and address, and if you represent a group.
Yeah, I'm Heather Johnson. I live at 140 and a half West Union Street, and I don't represent any group. But I'm a senior at OU, and I've been working with campus recycling for the past 3.5 years. And with my job, I've gotten to work towards zero waste goals with multiple different people and organizations throughout the greater Athens area. And in that time, one of the things that has become clear to me, and one of the reasons I love Athens so much, is how deep sustainability runs in this community. From the Athena Cinema Sustainability Series to different restaurants and cafes' compost systems to PassionWorks' use of recycled materials, it is clear that sustainability matters here. And AHRC is right there along with us. In their bid, AHRC mentions how they will help work towards sustainability and waste education goals, and I've seen this firsthand through their willingness to assist us with facility tours and extra composting needs when we sort through compost that OU's facility cannot process. Most recently, Mark, along with other AHRC employees, has been helping us with a plastic pollution awareness installation on College Green for Campus Race to Zero Waste. Throughout the course of this month, they've been helping us move a total of 4,000 pounds of plastic waste collected from campus back to our recycling center so we can use it for our installation. It is extra work for them and mildly counterintuitive to be sending the waste that they just picked up back to where it came from, but this project would not have been possible if the staff at HRC did not care about this community and were not so willing to help out at the drop of a hat. Even if you decide that sustainability doesn't hold much weight in this decision, there's the issue of OU move-out. As someone who has worked the past 3 move-outs, I can attest to the fact that it takes an immense amount of work. Move-out is not something that you can not plan for and just assume typical work hours and pickup schedules. Our typical hours at the recycling center are 8 to 4 on weekdays, but during the 2 to 3 weeks during and around move-out, we work with as many employees as possible, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single day, and we still find ourselves falling behind most days. Being able to service the residential areas during move-out takes a lot of planning, flexibility, and knowledge of how it all works. AHRC has all of these. If we give them a call and let them know that dumpsters are overflowing and need to be emptied, they will do it that same day. These types of connections and flexibility are only possible when the facility you're working with is close by, intertwined with the community, and has the immediate capacity to process all these materials. I know that as city council, you're obligated to choose either the lowest or the best bid, and I know that Rumpke has a lower bid, but as someone who has been working with AHRC / at the recycling center for many years and knows the ins and outs of what it takes to service the community in that capacity, I can say with confidence that I believe AHRC has the best bid.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Thanks for making the comments. Is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment? All right,
Madam President, if I
Yeah,
may.
yes.
Since I was named, I feel obligated to share this with anybody who would like it. The 1.7 million is in this document right here. I'm sorry I only brought one copy tonight. Whoever wants it can have it. I feel Melinda probably should get it, but if you would like a copy that clearly shows the $1.7 million difference, I'll be more than happy via email to send you a copy. So here's a copy that shows the 1.7 is readily available. It's not a secret.
Okay, thank you. All right. If no further comments, what we'll do now is move on to the topic of local government funds. And we were contacted on the 21st of February by the Ohio Municipal League about the Ohio representatives and their current consideration of legislation. This is House Bill number 33. This is the 2024-25 state operating budget. It's soon to go to the Senate. And what's happened over the past few years, the current local government funds is 1.66 of the state's general revenue funds that goes to the municipalities, townships, and counties. And this was this current percentage was established during the state's projected fiscal crisis a decade ago to fill a $8 billion biennial budget gap, and it replaced the previous level. It had been at 3.68. So we went from 3.68 to 1.66. And what that specifically means for the city of Athens is that at one point we have been as high as receiving $812,000 a year of these local government funds that we can use for our general operating costs. And over the years, we've shifted and gone to as low as, I believe, around $300,000, and we're now back up to $500,000. What we're doing with the piece of legislation is we're proposing a resolution. Council members have a draft of this, and we are urging the Ohio General Assembly to restore the local government funds to the pre-recession levels. Any comments or questions from council members? And Mayor Patterson, I know you speak on behalf of the Mayor's Association. You've got contact with a lot of villages and municipalities across the state, so you see firsthand not only the effect it's had on our community, but other cities and villages. Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, sure. I do. Thank you, President Nisley. I really appreciate council taking this up. This is something that the Mayor's Partnership for Progress, it's number 2 of our 10 agenda items almost every year that we've been an organization having to deal with the reduction in the local government fund. Number 1 is home rule, both of which we value highly. So again, I appreciate council taking this up. The Ohio Mayor's Alliance, this is first and foremost for them. Certainly is with the Mayor's Partnership for Progress and the Ohio Municipal League. All three are actively pushing this forward to where we can get full funding once again.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the comments. Okay, and if no other comments, we do have a draft of that. Council members are urged to take a look at the resolution. If they have any other comments or suggestions they want to add to that, then feel free to do so. We'll bring that up for first reading next week. All right, we will move to City and Safety Services Committee. And I would suggest, given we have two items of business, but I know that the reduction of the single-use plastic bags is certainly something that's of concern to everyone. So we may just one more week where we remain at the dais rather than breaking apart. Normally we have the City Safety Services Committee up here and then the other members of council down there. This particular committee is chaired by Councilmember McCary and joined by Council members Grace, Swank, and Crowell for this particular thing. So these items. So Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Nisley. We do have 3 items on our agenda this evening for our City and Safety Services Committee, 2 of which are presentations. One's a contract, and I would like to invite Councilmember Swank to introduce the presenters for the first item, on single-use plastic bag reduction.
All right, thank you. A little history. Single-use plastic bags is nothing new to our discussion of is nothing new to the city of Athens. Back around 2014, 15, or 16, not sure the exact year, legislation began to work its way through council to enact a single-use plastic bag ban for a variety of reasons that never made it to council to actually take action on and was withdrawn. But things have changed. In 2018, the Kroger Company, which is the largest dedicated grocery chain in the United States, announced that by 2025, all of its stores would be single-use plastic bag free. 7 years sounds like a long time, but they have been working on it. In the West Coast, Fred Meyer and some of those stores that are under the Kroger umbrella have already started this, and they have had great success with it. Here east of the Mississippi, Kroger is currently piloting this in Richmond, Virginia, at their Short Pump store. It's a rather large grocery store, and again, in talking to the management there, it seems to be going very, very well. In 2019, a group of people in this town got together and decided, you know what, we're going to do something about it. And tonight they're going to make a presentation to us. I first met with this group pre-COVID. COVID set us apart, although they kept working and kept working very hard and diligently. And then we got back together before the first of the year. Tonight, Nancy Pierce and Lee Gregg, part of Athens Rethink Plastics, along with Melina Miller, Melanie Smith, Cindy Burt, and Janley Stock, are going to present on a draft version of a single-use plastic ban in Athens. This group came together in 2019, and of note, they have partnered with the Sierra Club and obtained grant money to promote this cause. They conduct their educational measures by doing presentations, puppet shows in the school system, upcycling feed bags into shopping bags, and tabling at local events and film showings. I'd like to introduce Nancy Pierce.
And I want to point out that I left Dawn Harmon, there she is, wonderful member out of the list.
Sorry, Dawn.
So,
She didn't
yeah.
put you on the cast list.
So this ordinance that we're backing basically bars stores and restaurants from providing single-use plastic carry-out bags to customers at checkout. This does not include produce, meat, or product bags. The ordinance also includes a city fund to give assistance to businesses to transition and implement alternatives. So why ban single-use plastic bags? Because plastic is hugely polluting our environment, littering our roadsides, filling our oceans. Plastic lasts for hundreds of years. It doesn't decompose. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, microplastics and nanoplastics. And it contains possibly 10,000 chemicals used for various things in the production, to make it more stable, to make it more durable, to make it harder, to make it more flexible, to color it. Many of these 10,000 chemicals are toxic. Most are unregulated. These toxic plastics are in our oceans and waterways. Toxic microplastics are in our air and water and soil. Fish eat them. Birds eat them. Turtles eat them. They're in our food chain. We have them in our bodies. We consume roughly a credit card's worth of plastic each week. So, again, why ban single-use plastic bags? Because recycling for plastics is not a solution. Less than 10% of all plastic worldwide is recycled. Despite industry claims, most plastic is not designed to be recycled because of the chemicals in it. We used to think we could put it in the recycling bin and send it to China. Then China stopped that. Now it's still sent to underdeveloped countries where there are mountains, really mountains of plastic trash.
and trash filling beaches and streams. You have to wade through it. Very little plastic is recycled. More than 90% gets dumped or incinerated. So what happens to toxic chemicals when plastic is burned? Another reason to ban single-use plastic carryout bags is because we can do without them. It'll be inconvenient at first for consumers. Businesses are going to have to transition. But, for example, in Ireland, within weeks of a ban, their use dropped 94%. The head of the largest supermarket chain there, who had fought the ban, became a believer. He said, "We're saving the environment, and since we're not paying for bags, it saves money for us and reduces the price of goods for consumers." A local businesswoman who lived in California when a ban was passed said that in a month after the ban was passed, consumers were used to it. So why ban single-use plastic bags? Because plastic is a climate issue. It's a greenhouse gas issue. Plastic is plan B for the fossil fuel industry. They want to produce more plastics to make up for revenue lost with transition away from fossil fuels for energy. Plastics are set to drive nearly half of oil demand growth by 2050. This means more petrochemical plants in underprivileged communities in Cancer Alley, along the Gulf Coast, and in communities along the Ohio River. It also supports increased fracking, which means added methane pollution. Methane is 84 times the climate impact of carbon dioxide. It's crucial to reduce plastic production. Finally, plastic is a social justice issue. Plastic production and waste facilities are sources of dangerous pollution and largely located in underprivileged communities. 10 states statewide and at least 500 additional jurisdictions in this country have a ban or a fee for single-use plastics. A new poll came out just today from Oceana, an international organization protecting oceans, that 8 in 10 American voters are concerned about single-use plastics. This is Lee Gregg.
Yes, Lee Gregg. I'm presenting for Athens Rethink Plastic. And Nancy did a wonderful job of summarizing our concerns. And she asked me to speak to the health impact of it. We did, another member and I of the group did a presentation through Ohio Health for their lunch seminar series about the hazards of plastic that they present to our public health. So why are plastics a medical issue? And in fact, this is now being addressed by medical educators to doctors because they are recognizing that it is a big health concern. And why is it? Because 50% of plastics by weight are added chemicals. Much of it are unknown, they're unregulated, except some that are known to be to cause cancer and disruptions of the hormonal system. For example, according to an expert scientist who testified at a Senate state hearing on plastic last year, the sperm count in humans is now down 10% and is expected to drop to 50% in coming decades if this issue is not addressed. Now, because about half of the plastic is single-use, and the single-use plastic shopping bag that we're talking about here is the world's most used consumer product, banning plastic bags is not only the easiest way to reduce single-use plastic, but also it's very impactful in reducing plastic in our environment. Now, there are many people in Athens, and you may be one of them, who've been shopping with reusable bags for years. And we have found that vendors are usually very appreciative and supportive of our having our own bags. And they often say that they are not happy about using plastic bags themselves. One reusable bag is said to replace 700 single-use plastic shopping bags. A shift to taking your reusable bag to the store does mean developing the habit of taking the bags with you, just like remembering your cell phone, but people all over have done it. People in 10 states in the United States do it, and in 188 countries, they have learned to BYOB, bring your own bag.
Can I do?
Sure.
My name is Jana Lee Stock. I live in Athens County, but I do all my shopping right here in town. I am a former hospice nurse, then turned school nurse. And I live by the motto, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. My focus since retiring has been to learn about the effects of plastics on human health and the environment, and you really just can't tease apart the two. It would be no exaggeration to say within our small grassroots organization, we have spent collectively thousands of hours learning about this topic and teaching others, along with sewing our upcycled shopping bags, which is our vehicle for conversation. You have just heard a snippet of why we believe plastic pollution is a sleeping giant. Think of East Palestine, and you get a heck of a vision of what happens when we ignore the toxic nature of these chemicals used to make plastic. No one wants that now contaminated soil transferred to their community. We can look closer at home to the Ohio River in the eastern part of our county and remember the tragedy of C8 contamination. As someone involved in litter pickup at Stroud's Run State Park, Adopt a Highway, and the Hocking River Sweep, which I got to do with Sam last year, I challenge anyone or invite anyone to be involved in litter pickup and tell me we do not have a problem with plastic waste right here in our waterways. Too many pieces are so small and so numerous that we just have to pass it by. We can't pick it up. I've talked with many folks from all walks of life in Athens County, and there is no one that has ever turned around after hearing the facts and say, well, that's no big deal. It's more like, let's do something about this. This ordinance that's being discussed is the lowest hanging fruit, and I congratulate City Council for considering it. It is truly time to move forward with it for the sake of our children and our grandchildren. They will live with the folly of the choices we have made. Granted, many of them were made out of sheer ignorance, but we know better now. So the time is truly now to do something. Thank you.
Well, I wasn't scheduled to speak, but I'm just going to show this to all of you.
So, thank you for all of you considering this. And I do want to say, Nancy and I head up the subcommittee of the businesses in town. And so we've been meeting with these businesses for almost 4 years now. And Councilman Swank met with us at the Uptown Businesses, and he brought up a very good point recently, and that was, remember, and I think the person to whom you were speaking is a restaurant owner, I believe, and he brought up the point about remember when you could smoke in restaurants. And we can't do that anymore in most every business. So we are going to begin to install these signs. And these have been paid for by the Ohio Sierra Club through a grant. And we have we have, Dawn's husband has agreed to install them. So the signs will be free of charge, and the installation will be free of charge for as many as we have right now. We've already gotten two businesses actually to agree to put these outside their establishments, and this is before the discussion of anything to do away with plastic bags. So I just wanted to show that to you, and I just wanted to say that from a sustainability standpoint, this is a topic that really marries very well with the solid waste discussions we've all been having, because if you can do away with single-use plastic bags throughout most of the businesses in this community, you're going to reduce the level of waste that goes out to Poston or to the landfill, wherever. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Council, you have on your drive a draft resolution, and I emphasize the word draft. I have to thank Debbie and Lisa for countless emails back and forth and spellings and all of that to get to where it is today. If you look at the 13 whereases, and I'm not going to read all 13 of them by any means, but if you look at the 13 whereases, 4 of them are actually whereases that highlight previous resolutions passed by previous councils. One of them actually references an ordinance passed by a previous council. But the one whereas that I am going to read picks up very closely to what Milena just said. Whereas single-use plastic bags cause operational problems at recycling processing facilities, landfills, and transfer stations, and contribute to litter throughout the city of Athens. I talked to both Bruce Underwood at Athens Hockey and Recycling and the folks at Rumpke to verify that, and both said the same thing. They gum up our system. We're constantly pulling things and having to stop operations, which reduce efficiency and increase cost. So with that, I will turn it back over to our committee chair to conduct whatever discussion you deem appropriate, sir.
Thank you. I'll ask President Nisley what time we should conclude this item.
It's 8:08 now. Why don't we work towards 8:20? That
Okay.
would allow, I think, enough time for
Terrific. We'll start
citizen
with
comments.
comments and questions from committee members. Yes.
Well, I'm not on the committee.
Oh, you're right. Thank you.
Yes.
Other committee members first.
I'll wait.
Sam Crowley.
Thank you, Member McCary. Just a quick thank you for your work on this. This is great. I have one clarification. Single-use plastic carry-out bags do not include produce, meat, or product bags. Can you help me out with product bag?
You want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that it's kind of a strange way to say it. That comes from the Bexley ordinance, and those were the words they used that seemed to work for them. I think that means anything that is already packaged, or it could mean something like if you have bins and you get something inside the store, something that is not actually at checkout. So it's something that you would bring to checkout.
Gotcha.
What all this would borrow is what is at checkout.
Okay. Maybe another definition so
maybe
people
it means
understand
it.
what
Maybe-
that means.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question and answer. Do we have other questions or comments from committee members? I'll ask one. I'll direct it to Councilmember Swank. If you could just comment on any opportunities you might see for encouraging use of the reusable bags and branding opportunities.
Well, that's a perfect setup. Unfortunately, none of these are local, but I happen to have 1, 2, pick your size of whole food bags, already doing that, and the nice part is, people say we need handles, they have handles. Second one, Trader Joe's. Seasonal bag, regular old Trader Joe's, already being in use. I would have brought Aldi's bags to show you, but Aldi doesn't have bags. You bring your own. So I thought, and I haven't run this by the mayor yet, but I think he might like the idea. Wouldn't it be kind of neat to have an official Athens bag that we could buy in bulk? The various businesses in town could participate in it, and whatever our brand of the year is, or our current slogan or tagline or whatever is on that bag. And anywhere you go, you see that, and people take these bags home with them, and what a better way to promote Athens. So yes, branding opportunities do exist.
Thank you, Councilmember Swank, and I did want to mention that, or have you mention that in light of the amazing commitment to sustainability that we've seen here tonight and the pride that we take in that. So if there are opportunities for us to combine celebration of our commitment with the use of reusable bags, I think that would be great. And I know that Councilmember Reisner had a question or comment.
Yeah, I'm just thinking here. I was on City Council back when Jennifer Cochran introduced the first draft of an ordinance to get rid of single-use plastic bags, and part of that was charging a fee for the bag if someone needed it at checkout. And of course, the state of Ohio passed a law that took away our home rule on that issue. They basically said you can't do that. So I'm wondering, how do we get around it again? If we pass an ordinance, I'm absolutely certain that the legislature will pass a law that will say, no, you can't do that. Why? Because the state of Ohio is in the pocket of big oil, big gas. And they're not going to do anything to upset that. So I'm just wondering, how do we get around that?
Looks like a president. Oh, please go ahead.
What now is illegal in the state of Ohio is to charge a fee
That's correct.
for a plastic bag.
Uh-huh.
You can ban the plastic bag, and I'm sure that's what you're talking about, that you feel like they will probably go back on. Originally, House Bill 242 that stopped the second attempt that Mr. Swank spoke of by our group and actually Chris Fall and Lisa Eliason to come up with a plastic bag ban or fee. I can't remember exactly how they worded it at that point, but at that point, the state of Ohio prohibited both a ban and a fee. And then they extended it through COVID, but then what they put into the budget, snuck it in there, was just the prohibition of a fee. So, yeah, they could do that again. They could.
Okay, I'm a little
And it would
confused.
stop us.
You said they
could
there was an original ban?
They could reinstitute the ban.
Mm-hmm.
They could. And they could say that we don't have local rule to do that. They could do that again. You know, pressure's getting greater, though. People are catching on, hugely. I mean, I think back when Jennifer Cochran did it, brought it forward, she was right. But it just wasn't on people's radar. But now we just cringe. So many people see how much plastic is really a climate crisis.
Well, the other thing, I just remember, it's kind of hard for me at my age. Actually, in a little pain. I broke my foot a couple days ago, and it hurts. I remember when the pushback came with that ordinance, and there was quite a lot of yelling and screaming and whining about it. And I don't remember a lot of comments coming from the big box stores. It was a lot of uptown businesses were really upset about this. I think one of the things that was driving it was the fee. They didn't like that idea very well and thought that somehow it was going to cause them undue financial hardship. But I think it was also just the idea of you're taking away our plastic bags. Why would you want to do that? You're a bunch of anarchists.
We had this July free plastic-free July thing that we've done for a couple of years. And Milena and I went around to merchants in town asking for donations for prizes for people who would come in and they would make a pledge about, you know, what they're going to do to reduce their plastic use. And then they would go into a drawing and we would give prizes. And so we asked local businesses for that. They were delighted. They were really happy about it. We got wonderful stuff, you know, because I think that, especially in our community, there's a lot of awareness among local business owners. I think they almost have to be in that ilk. Well, a lot of them are. Local business is not easy, you know, and it takes a certain amount of dedication to community and, I don't know, blah, 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 blah. But,
Thank you. Just out of respect for time, we need to clarify whether we have any more comments from council members, then we'll move to administration and then the audience. Councilmember Ziff?
Thank you, Councilmember Carey. I guess more of a general statement, because this is something that I do care about a great deal. As a manager, I guess this is sort of going out into the digital ether to any business owners who may be watching. As a manager at a local uptown business who is responsible for a lot of the ordering and a lot of product management and dealing with the books, we switched completely from one-time single-use stuff completely to compostable cups, lids, sleeves, bags, everything. And yeah, it costs a little bit more. It cost us maybe 25 cents for this instead of 12. If your profit margin is riding on 12 cents of a transaction, your business has way bigger issues than switching from compostable to one-time use bags. You've got a whole nother problem you need to deal with. It's genuinely, and I was as you guys were down here talking and explaining, I pulled up on our ordering website out of curiosity, just to double check and make sure I'm not crazy thinking this. Yeah, I can go up on good old GFS and pull up all these compostable things. They don't cost that much more. So it's genuinely not hard for a business to switch. It is so easy. We did. A lot of other places have. Even if this never goes anywhere, if the state of Ohio comes in and says, you can't make that decision because we don't want you to, at least take the initiative in your own self, in your own practice. If you have a business in this town, I see so many people always going, oh, we love Athens, we support Athens. Well, this is a direct impact on Athens, on the environment of Athens that we live in. So take it upon yourself to do the right thing. I know sometimes that's asking a lot of people, but it seems pretty straightforward, and it doesn't cost that much. So I'll step off my soapbox.
Thank you, Councilmember Ziff. All right, I'll ask if the administration has any comments or questions at this time.
I have a question, I guess. Knowing that what Kroger's plan is that they're going to go single-use plastic bag free, will that also apply to their bulk items they have? If I go down and want some granola, that they're going to have paper bags or paper sacks there for? No, they're going to hang on to those?
Check out, you guys. Yeah, well, we've been in touch with the regional director of Kroger, the Sierra Club, and myself, and we've been discussing this for quite some time with them. I think it's just, right now, their goal is just at the checkout. But you have to keep in mind, they are not only the largest grocer in the United States, but around the planet, and they go by different names, and they have 32 of their own manufacturing facilities here in the United States. So they know that the time has come for them to quit wrapping potatoes in cellophane. And, you know, they know they're being pushed towards this direction. Our little tiny committee here is trying to push them harder and faster than their 2025 deadline. And I think these signs, we've hit 18 to 20 businesses here. You've already got Kindred and Aldi's and loads of places who do not give out plastic bags. And so the more signs we put up to encourage people to bring, trust me when I tell you, I've been in marketing all my life. There are going to be other people in this town who want these signs outside their businesses. And it's just a matter of time, you know. So.
You know, I would also say, I think this is a first step. It's kind of like getting used to this idea that really plastics matter, getting used to the idea of making these changes. You know, there's this, have you heard this, shop naked? Isn't that how they say it? You're supposed to buy, you know, buying vegetables that aren't, or various kinds of things that aren't wrapped in plastic. So it's kind of a first step. The Kroger in Cincinnati, when Cincinnati passed an ordinance prior to House Bill 242, the Kroger there said that they were gonna go along. They were gonna cut out their single-use plastic bags at checkout. So they've shown that kind of ability. Now they didn't because House Bill 242 came along.
Thank you.
Let them out.
I'm afraid we've reached our time, and after that great presentation and discussion, I would encourage any community members who have additional input to reach out to council via email, share your thoughts on this matter, and hopefully we'll find ourselves supporting this measure. We did have President Nisley correct the agenda earlier, indicating that we will not have the second presentation from the Ohio Valley Museum of Discovery tonight. Instead, we will move on to our third and final item, the Washington County Jail contract. This is a contract that we enter annually, and give folks a moment to transition here. Thank you. We've been speaking of contracts this evening, and this is one of our annual ones. Contract for housing prisoners in the Washington County Jail. This would allow the city of Athens and the police department, specifically as the contractor, to use the Washington County Jail to house as prisoners those persons who have been lawfully committed to custody by arrest or court order for any reason. The measure was, this contract was last adopted last April is when I believe we took action on it, and it's due to, the current contract is due to end at the end of March. So the biggest and most significant change is just in the cost. We were around like $85 previously, and now, and this is for the daily cost per prisoner that would be housed at the Washington County Jail. And it's now $100 instead of in the 80s. So I believe those are the main points, but I would like to invite questions and comments on this annual contract from committee members. Yes, Councilmember Swank.
Just out of curiosity, any idea how many nights of lodging we provided last year?
I will ask if the safety director happens to know how many times we've had to use this nightly accommodation.
Funny that you asked that. I just wrote down before you asked the question, look at how many times we've used this over the last year. So I owe you that answer. Because I knew you were going to ask that exact question. I just didn't get it beforehand. So I'll find out. And from time to time, there is a need. It's not daily. In fact, it's not even weekly. But there are times when the jail is full. And the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail is full that we're a part of. And then we end up having to go to spillover and go. But I'll find out how many times in the last year.
It may be worth noting that there can be additional expenses beyond the $100 if the person who's arrested requires medical attention. We would be paying for those additional costs as well. But I believe Councilmember Grace? Yes.
Yeah. I was just going to clarify that this is something that only happens if the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail is full. And we have agreements with other jails, not only the Washington County one, but this is the only one that requires council to approve it. And it's often the case that if the regional jail is full, many other jails in the region are also full. And so our police department does a significant amount of calling around and checking to find bed spaces.
Thank you, Councilmember Grace. So if we were to move forward, this contract would be effective April 1st of this year and terminated March 31st of 2024. Do we have any other questions or comments from committee members or other members of council? Hey, yes, Councilmember Eisner.
Does this include male and female?
Yes, and adults over 18, with
Okay.
small exception for if a juvenile court allows for or determines it's appropriate to house someone at the jail.
Okay.
All right. Comments or questions from administration?
Just a brief comment. You know, I remember we're sitting in your seats and it used to be somewhere around $50. So, I mean, this has steadily gone up. The other cost, just to share with those that you'd mentioned, is also the city's cost of transport. We're the ones who would have to transport the individual to said locations, and there's cost associated.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Do we have any questions or comments from the audience? Okay. With that, we will conclude our City Safety Services meeting for this evening.
And that concludes our meeting. We're adjourned.